lunch session. For this session on ODI, we have with us Mr. Nishit Parekh, who's a chartered accountant. He's a manager at Sudhit K. Parekh and Company, Mumbai. He's a Master of Commerce from Mumbai University and an associate member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He has over 6 years' experience in advising several domestic and international corporates on matters relating to international tax, FEMA, and structuring of inbound and outbound investment. He also has experience in handling wide range of cases at various levels. His areas of specialization are income tax, international tax treaty provisions, and FEMA. He has assisted various seniors in writing various articles and preparation for various presentations on varied tax issues. We welcome you, Nishit. Would request Mr. Vijay Bhatt to give him our memento as a token of our appreciation.
Good afternoon, friends. I hope everyone has a very nice lunch, and I'll try to keep you awake for 1 hour 15 minutes with my ODI presentation. So what I'm covering today is what is ODI, what are the different routes through which an overseas direct investment can be made, what are the critical or important aspects to be considered in an ODI investment, what is the regulation regarding investment by resident individual, and also what if an Indian corporate want to set up a branch or a representative office, and then probably we can take up some case studies if time permits. So what is the importance of ODI for India? If you look at the trend analysis for 99-2000, Indian ODI has been increasing. We generally hear about FDI coming into India, but Indian ODI has also taken an important role. Multinationals or Indian corporates are making their presence felt outside India. This basically we were second best to China in terms of investment which was happening from India to other countries. Also, this helps the government in improving the economic ties with the country. Because the investment is going to another country which is going to help that country, and also overall creates image of the Indian corporates overseas. So this is just a trend analysis which I have taken from RBI website. Here Singapore, Mauritius and Netherlands were the most preferred destination for ODI investments by Indian corporates. So this involves only direct investment details. So someone may set up a holding company in Singapore and may have a subsidiary in US or in any other country. But this statistics currently gives only the picture of direct investments made from India to other countries. What is the governing law around ODI and how do you interpret that law? Capital account transaction. Capital account transaction involves any transaction which alters assets or liabilities of a resident outside India is capital account transaction. So the moment I invest outside India, it will affect my balance sheet. It will come as an investment. So it is getting covered under capital account transaction. Capital account transactions are generally prohibited unless specifically allowed. And one of the regulation under section 6 specifically allows investment in overseas securities by a resident. So this is allowed. However, it is attached with some regulations which are popularly known as FEMA 120, and those regulations are updated on a time-to-time basis by RBI by various APDI circulars or notifications. And then other laws governing individual investment is governed by liberalized remittance scheme, which is very popular. We will be covering that also. So what is the meaning of ODI? ODI is subscription to MOA or contribution to the capital of a JV or a WOS, that is a joint venture or a wholly owned subsidiary outside India. It can be done through either a stock exchange transaction or through private placement in that entity or through market purchase or through investment like setting up an entity by yourself. However, portfolio investments are not included. When I say portfolio investment, it means any passive investment where I have just invested for some returns which are not related to my business, but any passive investment is not allowed. So as everyone would be aware, there is automatic route and approval route for investing overseas. Automatic route is your VOS or JV should be engaged in a bona fide business. Banking and real estate are prohibited, so I cannot enter into a banking business or real estate business outside India. If I am a financial sector company or I want to invest in financial sector, there are additional conditions provided under the automatic route itself. So if I satisfy all of these conditions, then I may be able to invest under the automatic route without approval. But for financial service sector, I may require additional conditions to be fulfilled, which I am discussing later on. One more condition is that Indian party should not be under RBI's exporters caution list or should not be under investigation by authorities such as ED, SEBI, etc. So the wording used in the regulations are etc. So what is covered in etc.? Today, if you look at the approach of tax authorities, they have been very aggressive. So search proceedings happening at a Indian company's office in Mumbai or in Delhi is very common. So whether that will get covered under investigation by an authority, it's something which is not clear, regulations are not clear, but according to me, it should not get covered as such, because income tax cannot be considered as an investigation authority. Further, the investment which is to be made by the Indian company should be not exceeding 100% of its net worth. Earlier, this limit was 400%, which has been recently in August 2013 has been reduced from 400 to 100%. That was because of the way Indian currency was behaving. To stop the flow of foreign exchange outside India, this measure was taken. And last is submission of annual performance report in respect of its overseas investment. So whenever I am making an overseas investment, at the year end, within 90 days, I have to submit an APR form with RBI. So if I am looking to invest for a second time, they also look at whether for my first investment, whether I am being compliant or not. So this was for automatic route. What happens to approval route? Under approval route, whatever is not covered under the automatic route should come under approval route. What does RBI do in an approval route? You have to make an application with necessary documents. They prima facie look at these 4 conditions. These are not sacrosanct in terms of these are just guidelines available. So this is not a rule or a thumb rule which RBI will definitely go through, but they would like to look at how feasible your business is. How will you be able to conduct your overseas business? What is the contribution to the country you are bringing in by doing this investment? What is the financial position and business track record of the Indian party and the foreign entity? Expertise and experience of the Indian party in the business which it is investing. So when I say financial position and business track record, so here someone may say that what about newly established companies? They may not have a track record. They may not have a financial position. So whether I can go under approval route or not. So here the answer is you will have to convince the RBI about your business plan, and based on the commercial expediency decision which they may take, they may allow or they may not allow under the approval route. But the funny part is under automatic route you need not prove this. So I am saying that under automatic route I can invest without having satisfying all 4 conditions, but under approval route I need to justify all the more. So as we discuss, additional conditions for the financial services sector is that it has to be registered with a regulator in India. Regulator SEBI, if insurance company is there, it should be IRDA. The foreign company also should be registered with the respective authority in that country. The company which is investing should make profits from its financial services activities in last 3 years, and compliance to prudential capital adequacy norms. Prudential capital adequacy norms, they say that the risk which the financial service sector company is carrying on in India should be quantified, and based on that they may approve or reject, even though it is under automatic route. So they may have to satisfy whatever the benchmark is set by RBI. So if they don't satisfy, then probably you may need to go for an approval. These are other important points. So investment in Pakistan, if somebody is looking to invest in Pakistan, earlier it was prohibited because of the relationship with Pakistan. But now, some 5 to 6 years back, it has been allowed but under the approval route. So even if you are satisfying all the conditions for investment in Pakistan, you still need an approval from RBI. Investment in Nepal can be done only in INR. So no foreign currency can go, you cannot purchase foreign currency and invest in Nepal. It has to go through INR. And for Bhutan, earlier it was similar to Nepal, but recently they have said that, okay, in Bhutan, you can also do in convertible currency. So now, whilst we are talking about investing overseas, who can invest? So an Indian party has been defined to include a company incorporated in India, a body created under an act of parliament. So here we can look at ICAI, ICSI kind of bodies, a partnership firm registered under the Indian Partnership Act. So by plain reading of this, if I am an unregistered partnership firm, then I may not fit in this criteria. Any other entity in India as may be notified by RBI. And here again there is a question in terms of what is the status of LLP, whether LLP can invest overseas or not. So based on the plain reading of the Indian party definition, it is not prescribed, so it may not be able to invest. And what about a resident? We are talking about investment by a resident outside India. Here if you look at the definition, resident is not included. So there is this controversy which was there earlier, where as per the section 6 of FEMA, it says any person can invest outside India, whereas in the notification or FEMA 120, they talk about Indian party. So people used to take a position that the moment I say the act is allowing me, so I can do it. And then later there were circulars and clarification which said that okay, it is allowed. So still, but this definition has not been changed. And there are special cases like what happens to proprietary firms, what happens to trust, what happens to unincorporated entities like AOP, BOI. Investment by proprietary concern. So these three which we discussed, I have taken one as an example, that for proprietary concern, some specific conditions have been prescribed by the government to say that if you satisfy all of these conditions, then you will be able to invest overseas. So condition is that it should be registered as a Star Export House. Star Export House registration means there are various exporters or manufacturers or many companies or proprietaries set up in EOU or SEZ units which can apply to become an export house, Star Export House. The same could be, there are different categories, Star 1 category, Star 1, Star 2, Star 3, and they have to satisfy certain conditions for investment, like they should have track record of good exports, exports outstanding, receivable from overseas entity should not exceed 10% of average export realization. It should be high, it should have high performance export record. So basically this facility is given to only those proprietary concerns having high export track record, and the amount of investment does not exceed 10% of the average of 3 years export realization or 200% of the net owned funds. So there is a restrictive condition that whichever is less and not whichever is higher. Then when we talk about definition, when we talk about WAS, JV, what is a WAS, what is a JV? So here they have defined what is a WAS and what is a JV. Wholly owned subsidiary has been defined as a foreign entity registered or incorporated in accordance with the laws of the host country and whose entire capital is held by the Indian party. And for JV, not the entire but less than 100% I have to hold. So here the question is whether I can take an argument that WAS says a foreign entity formed, registered or incorporated in accordance with the laws of the country. So can I take an argument if that LLP overseas is registered and is in accordance with the law of the country, I can invest in an LLP? Because as such, if you look at WAS, JV, it is typically assumed that it would be a company. So here, based on the definition, if we can prove that a foreign entity is formed, registered and is in accordance with the law of the host country, then probably we can take an argument and see what happens. financial commitment. So when I say that 100% of Indian companies' net worth is allowed to be invested overseas, then what is that 100% constituted of, and what I can invest in? So what it is constituted of, that we will come to later. But what I can invest in? I can invest in equity shares, preference shares. I can give loan to my JV or was abroad. I can give performance guarantee. 50% of the performance guarantee would be considered. Earlier it was 100, then reduced to 50%. Bank guarantee or letter of credit given by me on behalf of my subsidiary would also be considered in counting my investment overseas, and guarantee given on behalf of first step down subsidiary. So they are not talking about if I have multiple step down subsidiaries. If I am investing for the second leg or giving guarantee for the second leg, then it will not be considered as per the law as on date. So what I can invest? It is 100% of my net worth. What is net worth? Net worth is paid up capital plus free reserves. Paid up capital, someone may say equity, preference share is paid up capital. What about convertible preference shares? Because in accounting, if there would be someone who does a lot of accounting would know that that is classified as debt. So will I include that here? But if you look at FEMA regulation in terms of FDI, they have said that convertible preference shares, optionally convertible preference shares, would be considered as paid up capital. So based on that, we can take an argument, yes, it should be included. And for free reserves has not been defined what is included in free reserves. However, NBFC regulation defines what is free reserves. Under Companies Act, 2 section defines free reserve differently. So it's like you can choose or you have to stick to FEMA since it is similar. I would go with the later one, that FEMA is, since we are looking at a FEMA perspective, we will have to go to NBFC regulation rather than going to the Companies Act regulation. Then again in net worth, they say that while calculating your net worth, you may include net worth of your subsidiary, or if you are a subsidiary of your holding company, condition being there should be 51% stake. So if I am saying I have 100 crore net worth and my subsidiary has 50 crore net worth, I can look at taking 150 crores investment outside India, but I have to obtain and ensure that that company has not invested, and I can take a letter from them saying that I am not invested and you can use my net worth. So that is what they said, subject to letter of disclaimer. Then this broadly we touched up what are the instruments I can invest in: equity shares, preference shares. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so actually I have taken this as a case study. So you want me to take it up now or we can take it up later? So you are saying I have losses and my subsidiary has profits, or vice versa?
Yeah. No, it's just that I have losses and I want to calculate my net worth.
Net worth. So how to
on
do
ODI
it?
investment.
So yeah, we will take it up, surely. I think so 51% is the criteria. So it should, we should be able to, because it does not talk about, so sorry, it talks about Indian subsidiary, so it will not be allowed, sorry. Yeah, sorry,
So
it's Indian. And also they have specifically excluded proprietary concern. So if I am holding stake in some partnership firm or proprietary, that also I cannot take. So it's only subsidiary.
Yeah,
or a holding
subsidiary,
company.
but foreign.
No, foreign no.
Indian.
Yeah. So here again we've discussed what all I can invest in: equity shares, preference shares, debentures, guarantee. Then what if I want to acquire a company which is already existing in a foreign country? So where here they have said that if the valuation or if the investment is less than USD 5 million, you need to have a valuation from category 1 merchant banker or similar authority in that country. And if the investment is less than 5 million, then valuation of Indian CA or CPA of the overseas entity, overseas country is also allowed. And in case I am making additional investment, forget this criteria of 5 million, less than 5 million, but if I am making subsequent investment, I have already investment in a company, I am making a subsequent investment at a premium or discount, then also I need to get a valuation done. That why I am basically to justify the rationale of investing at a premium or discount by the Indian promoter who is already holding a stake. So equity has to be there, then only you will have the criteria, and then this is the totality. If it is at premium or discount.
Okay. And if you have subscribed to a CCD and those convert, those also need to be
So if you have subscribed to a CCD, you are saying,
for WOS, and then
so that in that case anyways valuation would be done.
the conversion or at the issue.
At the time of issue there would not be any valuation because it is allowed. At the time of conversion, if it is happening at a premium or discount to your original investment, then you will have to do it. Yeah. Then the regulation also speak about that if you want to invest through a SPV, you can do it. They have not specified on the layer, so you can have multiple layers of investment through which you can do. But with the new Companies Act coming in, they say that 2-layer structure is allowed. And they have given exemption for company which I acquire overseas, which has multiple layers. So it says that if I acquire a company which is existing and it has multiple layers, then it is allowed. But they don't talk about if I invest and then I create layers. So that is something, once the Companies Act come into play, we will have to see how we can merge both the things, or whether any amendment is made to those laws. Sorry?
Number of subsidiaries, is there any restriction?
In ODI? No, in ODI not, it is not there. But in Companies Act they have said 2-layer. Yeah. Yeah, holding company we are talking about. It's an SPV. We are not talking about operating companies. Yeah.
So this is interesting because Regulation 13 talks about investment or creation of SPV, step down subsidiary, right? Now there it's not expressly coming out from Regulation 13, but if you read Master Circular, there the wordings used are creation of a SPV.
Yeah.
So that is where the confusion is.
Yeah.
Because then if you really interpret that, they are only talking about a single layer SPV. And if that be the case, you cannot have more than, forget Companies Act, but then you cannot have more than one layer of your own course.
So, yeah, I agree what you're trying to say, but the problem is when you read it in isolation, there is a confusion.
No, and practically RBI has issued queries in some of the cases.
Where there is step down, multiple
Second-
SPVs, yeah.
second layer.
Okay. And to create a SPV, you again have to satisfy this condition that you are not on caution list or defaulter. So how do you fund your overseas investment? It can be through either of this market purchase. You can purchase the dollar from the banker and send it to your foreign company. You can capitalize your export dues, which I have covered what are the conditions on capitalization. Swap of shares. So if I can have an arrangement that I will issue shares to you in my company, you issue in your company. That can be done, but since FDI gets involved, FIBB approval would be required. Proceeds of ECB, FCB can be converted. Balance in EFC account can be used, and in EFC account there is no limit of 100%. That is what is specified in the regulation. In exchange of ADR, GDR, I can get the shares. If I have balance in RFC account, that is also what I can use. No, that is also not there in RFC account. Investment by capitalization. So here if I have any dues left from a foreign company in terms of royalty, fees for technical services, commission or other entitlements, then I can convert that into equity. That is allowed under ODI. But the time limit for getting that dues back in India is 9 months. Earlier it was 12 months. So if I am doing this conversion after 9 months I would not be allowed. Then I will have to go under the approval route, because then I am trying to do what is not directly allowed. So that is the rationale probably to put such a condition here. And in case the dues are outstanding for a period more than prescribed, yeah, that's what we discussed. What is the obligation of an Indian party? To remit funds, an Indian party for one single investment has to use one branch of AD for a particular overseas investment. So if I am investing overseas in say a Singapore company, ABC PT Limited, I have to do all my transactions through there. So here we had a very interesting case study where one of my clients had invested and they wanted to do after 6 years a subsequent investment. But at that point in time, they had changed their banking system. So the regulation says you have to go through the same branch. So what do? Then since we didn't have time, we had to actually go there, open the account in that bank again immediately and route the investment through there. But in other scenarios, probably what happens if the bank is shut or probably it's closed down, that branch is no longer there, then this all would become very practical difficulties which people may face. Then you have to receive share certificates or any other document as evidence of investment within 6 months. So some countries like Turkey don't issue a share certificate. So there probably you may need to check the entry in their registrar that XYZ has invested overseas and get that copy and submit with RBI. This third condition bullet is a very simple bullet, but most of us miss it because it comes as a footnote and it's not so relevant that 60 days, whatever services we are rendering to our WOS or JV, whatever dues we have to collect from them, we have to receive it within 60 days of it falling due. Sometimes they have these intercompany agreements, but this clause is conveniently missed out. So this is something which also gets into the reporting in your APR, that whether you have collected or not. Then exports, no. Dues, in terms of export, anyways 9 months time limit is there, no?
Once you do the export, at any point of a time before 9 months, you can capitalize?
Yeah, under the approval route, under the
But
automatic route.
when you go to GR form, there is a specific column wherein you have to mention that this export receivable I am going to convert into capitalization. Then and then I believe this is possible, because once you do the export, then this 9 months time limit is basically not for the conversion of export into equity, I guess so, because
No.
under the form GR and under the
Yeah.
regulation also they have specifically highlighted it has to be pre-intimation before export, not after export.
No, not necessary. What happens sometimes I have done the export. Then due to whatever problems the party says I don't have money right now.
Right.
Then they may say that you take a stake in my company.
But
At
then
that point in time,
it will be under the approval route.
no, it would be under automatic route, but you will have to fill a form ODI.
Okay.
The reporting is there. Even under automatic route, reporting is there.
Okay. Because then GR will be, is right, because once you export, it is going to be GR documentation. So it will be an open document. So what
that-
I understand, under the form GR, there is a specific column itself where it says that if you are going to receive it or are you going to capitalize this export receivable.
So technically, if you ask me at the time of issuing a GR, I would be hopeful that I will receive the money. And so I will always say until unless there is
No,
an
I'm
arrangement
saying-
to capitalize it.
I'm saying this is under the automatic route. Once subsequent decision about conversion, would I guess
So
will
you
be
can probably intimate that I'm going for this kind of capitalization, and
Yeah.
probably then you may be able to close or cancel the GR.
Yeah, because then otherwise GR has to be
Yeah.
closed.
That can be done. Then annual performance report has to be submitted within 90 days, that is 30th June for the last audited financial statement. So here again there is a problem in terms of, in some countries like in India, I have time to do audit till 6 months, 8 months. But this I have to submit based on last audited statement. So I will have to complete my audit compulsorily within 90 days to comply with this. And if audit is not mandatory in that foreign country, then you may have to take a certificate from your statutory auditor in India.
Sir, I have a question regarding APR. if we read the original notification 120, the para says 60 days from the period ended, audit period ended in the host country. Let's say I am talking about UK. UK give me a 9 months time. 31st March is the closing accounting period. 9 months, 31st December. Then I have again 60 days. So fairly 28th February or 1st March. Now this APR 30th June time is applicable on both the companies which are under an obligation in the audit. First company is under an obligation in the host country. Second, where audit requirement is no more there. So which is the 30th June? Because I understood there are two circulars they have issued overlapping on these issues.
So earlier they had mentioned 60 days from the date of audit.
From
now,
the from
now
the
they have
period.
done 30th June.
For both.
Yeah, so now they have not mentioned 90 days. That could be an interpretation that 90 days are there, but now the date is mentioned, and also it is for the wholly owned subsidiary or the JV, in my view.
And they have also mentioned in the case of a APR that it should be based on the latest audited financial
Yes.
statement. Let's say if latest audited financial statement is not available and my period is not closing on 31st March, my period is closing on 31st December. So what should I do in this?
You will have to approach the RBI saying that this is a practical problem that we have done in one of our clients' case where we had approached the RBI.
And you
they
take a specific exemption
yeah,
for this.
take a extension rather than
extension.
exemption. Extension we can take from RBI, and we had actually got it.
Yes, yes.
Post investment changes are in the investment which I have made. If I am doing any changes, I have to intimate the RBI within 30 days. So yeah. The foreign company?
That is going to subsequently happen.
Yeah, so that I'm covering in the next slide. You are actually ahead of my presentation. JV or was may diversify its activity, then I have to report. Step up, step down subsidiaries, I have to report. Alter the shareholding pattern in overseas company, I have to report. So loan is not mentioned here. If my JV is taking a loan, a big loan, then probably some people take a position that even if they take a loan, they intimate to RBI that my subsidiary has taken a loan. So these are broadly the compliances which I need to carry out for an ODI investment. First step would be a board resolution passing in the Indian company that I want to invest overseas. Then if I am acquiring an existing company, then the valuation requirement, I need a valuation report. Then reporting in form ODI within 30 days from the remittance. Then RBI will allot a UIN to me, that is unique identification number. This UIN has to be used for all subsequent investment in that company, or else your remittance will not happen. Filing of share certificate within 6 months, and post investment changes that needs to be reported. So here we are talking about transfer of shares of JV or WAS. If there is no write-off involved, then what could be the conditions under automatic route? So if the sale is not resulting in write-off and it is happening through a stock exchange, I can do it under the automatic route. In case it is not a listed entity, then transfer is not happening at a price less than determined by CPA or CA. No outstanding dues from overseas entity. An Indian party is not under investigation, and that 1 year the foreign company has been in existence. So here, to answer your question, probably if you are not satisfying any of these conditions, which you may not, because it's a liquidation, so it may be a loss making situation or something like that, then you may need to approve.
It's a court-driven process in that host country. Even if I, let's say, go to the RBI and RBI says no, you cannot go under liquidation. How does it have bearing on the process over there?
So in my view, whether you are getting the money which is you invested,
Let's say I invested 100 million. Today I'm just getting 20 million out of the liquidation.
then you will have to go for the approval route because it is not satisfying here. You will have to explain the situation because it says that if you don't satisfy this condition for a write-off, you will have to go for the approval route.
But sir, the question is again that I have to go compulsory under liquidation under the laws of that host country.
Yeah, so then you will
how
have
can
to.
I go to the RBI and say that please do not ask? If let's say RBI says no, you will have to bring 100 million. I cannot stop the liquidation
No,
process.
so here you will get a permission to get 80 or 60 because you have a genuine case to prove that no, the money is not siphoned off, it's a court procedure, it is something genuine and I can prove it. Then you will get the approval to get the lesser amount. They will not say you get 100. They will give you an approval to get 60 or 80.
But that 20 million is already going to come to me. That's not going to stop anybody. Nobody is going to stop me from getting the 20 million.
Which 20 million is lost,
I-
right?
No, 180 million is lost. I'm
Okay.
only getting 20 million. So nobody is stopping me from receiving that 20 million. The liquidator over there is going to give me that 20 million and he's saying I'm selling off your company, it's going to end its life. In that circumstances, do I have to just intimate the 30-day intimation process to the RBI that look, my company got liquidated and this is the situation, I'm only getting 20 million out of it? Or there is a certain procedure of approval from the RBI that yes, you can take a write-off in your books and also go through the liquidation process.
I think so it would be advisable in terms of approaching the RBI for it. I understand that you have no option. You are anyways going to get that 20 million and you want that 20 million.
Yes,
Because
that's
you
the only
lost
thing.
80 there.
Right.
So I think so, but it would be advisable because here the case is also simpler. So you will not face much hurdle. So that is why it is advisable to go to them.
Thank you.
Then RBI will not come to know. But anyways, you will again have to. You will receive something at least. Nothing. So what do? So you are not bringing in anything. I think still as a post investment change you will have to intimate and also go because then there is no approval required to bring the money because there is no money coming in. And logically that could be the solution.
We've had a case where there was a write-off, and in that case, what we had done is post receipt of money, we'd filed with RBI the details with the report of the liquidators stating that only this much is due, and then RBI has not raised any.
They have
more.
not raised any
No.
question. So
We've
probably
had a case.
this could answer your question. She is saying that they have had a practical case and they have done it. So they have
Yes.
not got an approval. They just intimated the RBI and RBI has still yet not taken any action.
No, RBI had asked for some financial
Financial-
statements and all of that, which we've given, and we've given the report of the official.
Yeah, but then they
liquidator.
would have issued an order, no?
Yes.
Saying that okay.
Yes.
So then it's an approval, no? So the problem is that you took the approval after the transaction. I am asking to take it upfront. Post facto approval.
We dealt with the transfer of shares in a GV or was. And in a case that A is holding into B 100% and B is holding into C, and we propose that a B is gets merged into A, and therefore A directly holds into C. In this case, when you take a look at a regulation 16, it talks about the transfer of shares by way of a sale. Now here the sale of shares is not happening. So what is your view? Because if you look at the FAQs to the RBI, it talks about disinvestments, which even includes the transfer by way of amalgamation or the restructuring as well. Well, if you look at the regulation 16, it talks about only transfer by way of sale of shares. So can we take a view that RBI is only looking to just looking at the transactions where the transfer is happening only by way of a sale of shares and not otherwise?
We can take that position because your ultimate shareholding is not changing because you are holding in A, B and B was holding in C. And you are the entire shareholder. It was a WAS and not a JV. So probably then that argument is only something which we can take because I don't think what would be the problem in a sense if you look at.
So my question is that while the FAQs talks about the disinvestment, the regulation 16, which has now been amended, it doesn't talk about the disinvestment, by way of sale of shares. So can we, just strictly look at the language and say that, this is transfer by way of a sale of shares, where, in my case, there won't be any sale of shares, and therefore it should not be applicable.
So here what is happening in this kind of regulation is that there are quite a few statements, not even from ODI perspective, but FDI perspective also, where if you read in totality, the interpretation comes something different. So in such cases, generally, people go to RBI because it is not like a tax thing where I will take a position and then fight it out. It's better to be on the right side. So I would be very interested to know what you did actually in terms of practically, because my view is again,
Saying that this is a scenario that can be looked at, such a situation in this way.
I will have to check on this. Probably we can take this offline because I can't think of a solution currently on this transaction. So you're saying A into B, B into C, A, B gets merged and A gets the holding of C. So there is no sale as such, but shares are transferred. So what is the solution? So here, if there is a write-off, what an Indian party may transfer by way of sale to another party without prior approval of RBI, if the following conditions are satisfied. In case the JV is listed overseas, then I can do it. In case where Indian party is listed on stock exchange in India and has net worth less than 100 crore, I can do it under automatic route. Where Indian party is not listed and investment is less than 10 million, then I can do it under automatic route. Where Indian party is listed company with net worth less than 100 crore, but investment does not exceed 10 million. All these are independent conditions. If I satisfy any of it, I can do it without the permission, or else I will have to go for an approval. Post investment changes you will be required to.
Yeah, but basically, I, as an Indian company, has not invested. The subsidiary has received primary infusion from another party, and hence, from 100% stake I have in that subsidiary, it say now reduces to 20% or 10%.
Yeah, so it's dilution is happening of your stake. So logically it should be. So here, what are the laws on restructuring of investment? Whether I can write off my investment. So under the regulation currently, under automatic route, if you are writing off 25%, you can do it if you are holding more than 51% stake, and copy of balance sheet showing why you are writing off and what is the benefits you will get out of this write-off needs to be has to be submitted, and you can do it. And in case of unlisted Indian party holding more than 51 shares, write-off to the extent of 25% investment is allowed under approval route. Now let's go to individual investments. Individual investments, there are certain general permissions available. I can get gift of foreign securities from person resident outside India. So that way I can acquire shares. Under cashless ESOP scheme, if I am working for say an Indian company and my group company which is in US is very happy with my performance, they can give me ESOPs, even of the parent company, and that is allowed. And by way of inheritance, so if I have some relative abroad, I can inherit shares from them, and once my demise is there, my son, my daughter can also do it. The entire thing is allowed. Qualification shares, some company require when you become a director, you need to obtain some qualification shares. So that is allowed. Then general permission is that USD 75,000 can be invested overseas. Earlier it was 200,000. Again on 14th August 2013, to control the currency, it was reduced to 75,000 USD. But when an individual is investing in an overseas entity, it cannot create a step down subsidiary. Form ODI needs to be submitted within 30 days, and a lock-in period of 1 year is provided. If any of the above conditions are not satisfied, you will have to go for an approval. What are the obligations? Individual can transfer the shares acquired, as we discussed earlier, based on that conditions. Sale. No, gift of foreign security is allowed. So there is no limit. No, this under the, it will get covered under the general permission, the first bullet, and you may be able to take it. Yeah. So this, I understand where you are coming from. You are coming from that this 75,000 is prescribed. So how can I get 1 lakh? They are more concerned with money flowing out of India. So your money is not flowing. So they are not worried, even if it is 100,000.
But in such cases, they do insist on proper KYC. It will be subject to local law, whatever they work.
Yeah, those laws will anyways apply. Whatever, if there is a gift tax, you may have to pay, depending on that local laws. Form ODI, because it's an investment overseas. Yeah. This we've taken, okay. So this LRS, that is Liberalized Remittance Scheme, was introduced in 2004, basically for individuals to giving them certain liberty in terms of what they can invest. Again, as discussed, it was, yeah. There would be some provision in terms of like for foreign clients who are in India, they have various chartered accountants paying on their behalf, and anyways you can remit the money. See, in India there is a form for filling taxes. So if that form is online available and your banker is allowing to fill that, and probably once you pay any duty, there could be any return obligation also for you filing return in that country. So I think so the two options could be either you can pay it through someone, or if a direct remittance is possible to the government of that country by filling a form and to the banking channels. Under? It would be a current account transaction, no? So it should be allowed. No, payment of taxes I am talking about. Yeah, so that property. But we were properties anyways now directly or indirectly not allowed. So here we are talking about inheritance of shares and not other things. Property directly or indirectly, why the circular has been disallowed. It's prohibited now. Then probably we need to check. I am not so aware on this. So here, as I was discussing, immovable property has been prohibited from 14th August 2013. The limit is 75,000 USD. Earlier it was 200,000 USD. Here, an resident individual can open and maintain foreign accounts abroad with prior approval. Without prior approval of RBI, and remittance not permitted to indirectly to Bhutan, Nepal, Mauritius or Pakistan, or any country specified as non-cooperative countries, territories or those identified by Financial Action Task Force. Currently there are no countries specified in this second list.
My entity is in not in one of these 4 countries. Let's say in United States, it has a bank account in Mauritius. If I need to make a remittance, can I make a remittance to the United States entity which will credit its Mauritius bank account? Or let's take a vice versa scenario. The entity is in Mauritius, has a bank account in US. If I make a remittance to the US bank account, it will eventually benefit the Mauritian person.
So you are saying a foreign company is having a bank account only in Mauritius?
The US entity is having a bank account in Mauritius.
Offshore account.
And if I am making a payment to him or that entity, it's eventually getting credited into Mauritius. In that circumstances, what am I supposed to?
Because if you look at the language, it said directly or indirectly.
So either ways I cannot do it.
I think so you may fit into indirectly here.
Okay.
So what are the regulations towards setting up a branch or rep office abroad? opening of a branch office or a representative office overseas is allowed. AD banks in India permit to remit funds for initial expenses and recurring expenses. Initial expenses remittance is up to 15% of average annual income or sales of last 2 financial years, or up to 25% of the net worth, whichever is higher. And for recurring expenses, it is 10% of average of annual sales or income of last 2 years. Here, branch office or the representative office should be conducting normal business activities of the Indian company. So it has to conduct activities which an Indian company is conducting in normal course. Will not enter into any contract or agreement in contravention of the FEMA Act. So my branch also has to comply with the regulations which are prevailing in India. Any funds which are lying there has to be repatriated to India. Any funds rendered surplus should be repatriated, and audited financials of BORO needs to be submitted to the AD bank. So here there is no time limit, but I think so it should be immediately, because once the financials are freezed, there is surplus lying, so that should logically come to India. This form OBR is not specified. It was there earlier in the exchange manual, but still certain bankers are insisting on submitting this form. So now let's take up case studies. So here the first case study is Indian company has invested in UK. Indian company has invested in UK, and now after some period, Indian company is looking to get converted into an LLP. So whether that should be allowed or not. So here what practically people were taking a position that I had invested 400% of my net worth. So this is just one argument which people are taking. I also don't agree with that view, but people say I have invested 400% and now the limit has been reduced to 100%. So I cannot disinvest 300%. I have to look at the condition as on date, whether I am an eligible party as on date. So if I say I was an eligible party on the date of investment, post facto changes would affect my investment as on that date. I cannot make subsequent investment, I agree. But this is something which is open, but
they are related to making investment, and again 14th August clarify that this limit will not apply to the existing investment what is already made.
so but it says because the investment, the rationale for that was that as on date the investment was allowed.
Okay.
So here can I say as on date I was a...
No, it is more related to the type of entity rather than financial obligation.
So here you are distinguishing it, but conditions are conditions. So I am taking a position which I am taking for one particular regulation or one particular definition, I will take for other definition also. I also don't subscribe to this view, but it's just a thought which people are looking at. Sorry? Yeah. As we looked at earlier, an Indian party definition does not... Because I don't remain an eligible party. So again the question... Yeah, so if that is the case, RBI should have come out with an FAQ, because for 100%, 400% they immediately came out with a clarification. So here there is no clarification. So it is up to you and me what view I take, what view you take. Because what you are saying is the argument I am putting forth. I was an eligible party on the date of investment. Now I am not. So what? So the second case study is I have an Indian company. Indian company got merged with another Indian company. Earlier preference shares got replaced by debentures as per the conditions of merger. Existing investment was exacted 100%. So here, what is the solution for the Indian company? Because here the problem is that I am allowed to invest 100% of my net worth. That is my capital and my free reserves. So here my capital is getting converted into a loan. So what is the remedy?
If there are changes within the financial commitment, then there are no
No,
permissions.
financial commitment is for what I can do overseas, what
That
all
is
I
correct.
can invest. I am looking at my net worth. My net worth is 100% of.
No, what I'm saying, sir, preference share got converted into equity. That is the debt, debenture. I am on the point number 3. Earlier, preference shares got replaced by debenture as per the condition of merger. So, first of all, it is transferred, transferor and transferee both are under the permissible entity, that is companies. Then second is within the, because when I say financial commitment, it includes capital contribution, debt to subsidiaries, guarantee, etc., etc. So from preference share, I am converting into debt security.
No, so what you are talking about is that when I invest in a foreign company, I
Yes.
look at what is my financial commitment.
Correct.
But what I can invest is 100% of my net worth.
That is correct.
And your
That is the
changes
ceiling.
are happening at my level, not at the foreign company's level. What you are trying to say is that if the FCO converts his equity into debt, I should not have a problem. That I also agree. But I am saying the ICO is converting its debt into, equity into debt. And as ICO, I can invest only 100% of my net worth.
Net worth, okay.
And net worth is defined as paid up capital plus free reserves. So if we start doing this, it would like whatever I am not able to do indirectly, I will do it.
To that extent, it shall be allowed. But the whole question is that your financial commitment is always calculated as per the last audited balance sheet. If at the time of merger, your balance sheet gets audited and your net worth gets to that is audited, at that time of particular point of time, you may be asked to disinvest to that extent. But if it is not, then since at that point of time it was the investment was correct or it was within the prescribed limits, it should not have a bearing.
So then what we discussed earlier should also be allowed. I don't know this laptop would have it or not.
I think that it should be a perspective. It cannot be like making this kind of changes. It will be applicable.
So you were saying it would be allowed.
It should be, because we have to look at the language that it should be prospective. So anything now I further to be supposed to be get invested, not based on my past performance or investment, that should not be affected. But now henceforth, suppose I want to make a further investment which crosses the 100% limit, then it should be prohibited. It should be like that.
No, then what will happen is that everybody can plan this.
No, it is not a matter of planning. It now, because we are having a problem of the foreign currency, foreign exchange, and therefore the prohibitions is imposed. For that, the further remittance should not be allowed. Whatever already business, suppose somebody has already put in money of 400%, now bound to be there are some changes to be happen in global scenario. So that cannot be stopped.
No,
That's all.
no. Then we are talking about going under approval. It's not information, because what we cannot do directly, we are doing it indirectly. So we are changing the substance of the investment.
No, if language is available, we can debate it is better, I think.
We could invest 100 crores or based on our capital. Now we are as of that date, yeah. No, so then you approach RBI, no? That is what I'm saying. We are talking about going under, no, not for the merger. For that, because of this event which has taken place in my company, I may not be able to comply with the regulations which were there as on date. So again, once you intimate,
I have a huge loss by which my net worth goes down drastically and it comes to only 50% of whatever I have invested. Is there the RBI does not provide that I should get back that capital? As on the date when I made the investment, I need 100% this thing. That is my view, but you could differ on this.
No, so you were saying the Indian company's net worth eroded.
Eroded, yeah, substantially. Because
And
of the
it was
loss. Dollar
100%
going to 80
invested.
rupees tomorrow.
Forget dollar. I have made a huge loss in my Indian operations. Today it's zero.
Okay.
It's a BIFR company, but still my
Investments are there. Yeah, probably this could be an argument which we can take. No, you can do a disinvestment. No? You can do a disinvestment. That's an option, yeah. They can ask you to disinvest, no then. No, once you go for post-investment changes or you intimate them, they said that for complying you disinvest, then yes.
it's not an approval which I'm asking from them. So what they can do is just take it on record. That's all. They can ask you buy a specific product, but they will have to give some
I think shall we proceed to the next one? Then
Yeah.
we, if time permits, we'll come back to this point.
So here I have 3 investments, one in UK, one in US and one in Singapore. So here I have not filed an APR for one of my investment in UK for last 2 years. And now I want to invest in US entity. So one of the condition under automatic route is that all the APRs are required to be filed. So here I will face a problem in terms of my subsequent investment. So what is the option here? So one is either you compound and file the APRs and then go under the automatic route, or can I directly go for the approval route without doing all of that? So I am saying, so here the question is that I have invested in 3 subsidiaries. In UK, for the UK company, I am not filing my APR for last 2 years. Now I want to make a fresh investment or additional investment in my US company. So whether I can go under automatic route, because automatic route says that all the APRs are required to be filed. So one option is you go compound your offense saying that I have not filed, I will file it and whatever it is you sort it out and then go for the automatic route, or without doing this I can directly approach RBI. So you are saying you invest and go for both the offense together. I think so. The answer should be regularize the APR and then go. So here we are saying a newly incorporated company as on 1st April 2014 and wants to make an investment, not let's say June or July, then it has to calculate net worth as per its last audited balance sheet. Then what do I do here? So earlier, that is the answer probably, but earlier it was easier with the new Companies Act coming in. You require company law board permission for changing that accounting year, so it will become more so difficult here. So you will get the audit done for interim period. So here is the example which we were discussing in terms of that a gentleman had raised a question also, that what if I have a subsidiary where I am holding 51% or more and now I want to invest in a foreign company and my net worth is, one scenario is my net worth is 50 crore and net worth of my Indian subsidiary is minus 60 crores. So how much can I invest in UK? Second option is I have a negative net worth of minus 50 crores and the foreign company and the subsidiary has a positive net worth of 100 crores. So what is the investment I can do under both the scenarios? Sorry? And in the second scenario? Yeah, so I also agree with the answer. It is an option available to me, so I can exercise that option. In the first case, I will not exercise. In the second case, I will exercise. Sorry.
My net worth is I'm having losses Now,
Okay.
if my paid up capital plus reserves, now in reserves there are losses. So if two scenarios, if my paid up capital is let's say 100 crores, my loss is 120 crores. And situation 2, my paid up capital is 100 crores, my loss is 80 crores. What is my net worth in both the circumstances?
So it has to be total, no? It's addition. Free reserve.
So, so,
Yeah.
so in first case it has to be negative. Will it be taken
So
as
you're
a
talking
negative?
about your company itself,
Yes,
not the
yes.
subsidiary.
Not the
So
subsidiary.
it's addition, no? It's says paid up capital plus free reserves.
So in case of negative, I cannot even.
Yeah. So there is no option there that whether I want to consider free reserves or not.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So here one more scenario is that Mr. A is a resident of India working in an MNC. Mr. B is also working with the same MNC, but he is outside India and he is working for the foreign company. Both are granted ESOPs, and since B is in that country, he pays the consideration of $1 each on behalf of Mr. A. Whether this is allowed? Gift of shares. Can I say it is gift of shares? It is for a consideration of gift. So here the issue is whether it's a gift of shares or gift of money. Yeah. So how will I be able to do this transaction? Yeah. So it would be, they would be friends, not related. So then there is no gift angle. So here, I think so he would have to, because it is getting shares. But first the transaction is only not permitted. Remitted. Then yes. Then I think so. No, then gift of shares is allowed. ESOP is allowed, no? No. Here, this is a one more that I have investment overseas. Now an Indian party wants to purchase those shares, complying with all the conditions. Whether I can do this transaction in INR?
Is a transfer of share between two resident Indian companies.
Both are eligible parties, so
Both
it is
are
allowed.
eligible, subject to certain terms and conditions. They are allowed.
But there is no flow of foreign exchange.
Hardly
Then what
matter.
will I report in my form ODI, which asks for the foreign
Part
currency
4
valuation?
is a INR foreign currency equivalent to INR.
So you will convert on your own and do it,
Yes.
even though the investment is changing hands in INR.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think so. This it has to be in foreign exchange, no? Because that's what I report. No, it is transferring investment in a foreign company.
Both the companies, buyer and seller are in India.
Yes.
Is it not that the payment has to be in
No,
INR?
not necessary. No? I can purchase and do an investment and sale because the conditions required. So I may have a practical difficulty in terms of what I report. So that practically people take, I convert and report.
Reporting is one part, but what about the transaction? Actual transaction? Can
Foreign currency to give it to some Indian himself.
So I can say, no, it is for my ODI investment.
Agreed. But when between two resident Indians, can there be a foreign currency transaction other than those specifically allowed otherwise?
I think so for this, they may be able to do it.
It has to be
Okay.
only specific transactions like in diamond market we have given the diamond
Yeah.
account. You can take otherwise.
Yeah, that all conditions remain. Yeah, I think so. This was the last slide.
We still have some time. Any questions for the speaker? I think yesterday's voting effect continues today. Nishit bhai, you mentioned that post lunch the effect seems that everyone is alert, and there was a lot of question and answer and interaction between the speaker and the audience, and I request in view of that Dipen to propose the vote of thanks.
Dear friends, overseas direct investment is quite important in terms of in comparison with FDI also. In one of the last years, India is the second highest foreign direct investor in UK after USA. So understanding the subject is very important for everybody who is sitting in the conference room, and our speaker has made his best attempt and he did very good, wonderful job. In just 47 slides, he covered complete master circular, notification, FAQs, and I would like to bring one small example before you. The basic nitty-gritty of the subject. He mentioned one small point, the definition of the investigating agency. You know, he make a very crucial point. If an Indian company is under an investigation of an income tax department, then it could not be called is under an investigation agency. Let's say A Limited, a raid has been occurred, but an A Limited wants to make a overseas investment. That particular income tax raid would not create any hurdle for that overseas direct investment. But if it is a CBI raid, then in such a situation, then Indian company has to approach to the Reserve Bank of India. The very fine-tuned distinction which the learned speaker has made, and I request all of you kindly join me and deliver a very hearty vote of thanks. Thank you.
We break for tea for about 10-15 minutes. We reassemble. Thank you. And please note, today we have the session till about 6:15. Today as well as tomorrow.